We look now at public theology and the secular. Some years ago, I was invited to South Korea to make a presentation at a conference for Asia-Pacific conflict regions. I was one of two outsiders asked to speak of conflict in other regions, in my case, the Northern Ireland conflict. My presentation was early in the conference, and I offered a very political analysis of our violent conflict and of the peace process. Having got that over early, I settled down to listen with interest to contributors from the Asia-Pacific region. Very quickly I realized just how very Western I had been. I had made a very secular contribution, saying nothing about religion or spirituality. Religion and spirituality I had parked at the door. The Asia-Pacific contributors from different Asian religions, Christians being a minority, but every contribution on their conflicts and search for peace included the political and the religious and spiritual. I realized that for these Asians and Pacific Islanders, there was no Western dichotomy or dualism between secular and sacred, the political and the religious. Their religions and spiritualities were not left in the hotel car park, as I had done. I had given a very Western presentation which had bought into the dualism and was the poorer for it. I think they may have found my approach hard to understand. The secular and the sacred is a very Western dualism. At the same time, we live in the West in a very secular society, whatever exactly that means. What does it mean to live in a secular society, and how secular is society? Church leaders sometimes complain about the secular and lament the marginalization of the church. The media is frequently blamed for the secular agenda. Many years ago, I remember a then leading politician in the Republic of Ireland complaining on the RTE Late Late Show that there was no sex in Ireland before the Late Late Show. I think he thought Gay Byrne was the devil incarnate. The issues are much deeper and more complex. From early in the 20th century, we had the death of Christendom, the loss of power and influence of organized institutional religion, and we had the largely global spread of democracy. We need to understand what the process of democratization has been doing in societies. We will come to that soon. Meanwhile, our language is confused and confusing, with words like secular and related words meaning different things to different people and in different cultures. Something has been going on in our Western society, and from the academy down, we are not altogether sure what it is or how to describe it. Let me attempt to give some meaning to three similar words, but which may mean different things. The words are secularization, secularism, and secular. Secularization is the process of religion increasingly losing power in the public square. Institutional religion in Ireland over the last 50, 60 years has lost its public power. It no longer controls and no longer has the power of control in public life. Institutional religion no longer dominates. In areas of life, the state now controls what the church once controlled. Institutional religion, either because it has been pushed out of the public square or because it has itself retreated from public space, it is now on the margins. This is secularization, and the process is often a societal reaction to once powerful and dominating religious institutions. Secularism is the often aggressive opposition to religion in public space. The insistence that religion should have no space in public life, but should be where it rightly belongs, in the realm of the private. This has tended to be the stance of the new atheists, that all religion is only superstition, irrational, and a toxic poison. There is a militancy about it that is as intolerant as religion itself has sometimes been. It can be as closed as the most militant forms of religious fundamentalism, and may be a form, indeed, of atheistic or secular fundamentalism. It is anti-democratic in its insistence that no religion should have any place in the public square, but stay in the private. This is secularism, and it is intolerant, anti-democratic, and that should be called and opposed. Secular is something different. It recognizes that the politics of society and governance should be carried on without interference or dominance of religion and religious institutions. That national constitutions do not need a God reference. Secular is society organized on the basis of human reasoning and not divine revelation. Secular actually means democratic or democracy. Democracy is pluralist, and though it is not a perfect form of governance, always a work in progress, it is and will remain for the foreseeable future the best form of governance we have. We live in a pluralist democracy in both parts of Ireland, though there may be some who find the pluralism of democracy hard to accept. But without pluralist democracy, we have exclusion and social, political, and cultural forms of discrimination, in other words, injustice. Democracy has core ingredients: pluralism, freedom, tolerance, respect, human rights, equality of participation, power shared, mutuality, accountability, the rule of law. Democracy is also participative and deliberative, in that all are involved and all are engaged in the conversations, the dialogue and the discourse around public affairs and what makes for the common good. Democracy means that all have a voice, with equal right to be heard and express that voice, but no voice is privileged. The faith voice has the right to be heard in a pluralist democracy, but no longer a dominating voice, no longer a hegemonic voice, but one voice among the plural many. And the only power the faith voice has is the power of moral persuasion. Faith in the secular, pluralist, democratic society no longer has the power of the state, the power of state legislation, or any coercive imposition. It has the right to be in the public square with all the other voices, only with the power of moral persuasion. This is what it means to live in a pluralist democracy, and this is secular society. This is how a leading public intellectual and Turkish Muslim philosopher and theologian understands secular. He is opposing ideological secularists and political Islamists. Fethullah Gulen understands the secular as, quote, the participation of citizens of all religions and none in the public life of a society. For Christians or Muslims or any other religion, secular is our best bet, living in a pluralist democracy. Christianity in the West is not going to return to any privileged place, to any kind of hegemony or dominance, nor should we want to live in a society that has any hint of theocracy, the rule of God through political or religious leaders. In a democracy or secular society, we have a place in the public life of society. Those committed to secularism need to realize the nature of the secular and the practice of pluralist democracy. People of faith need to recover the appropriate confidence to return to the public place as partners in the creation of the common good. Public theology needs the secular and can contribute to it. Let's look at connecting and collaborating with the secular. In session 4, we explored the primary symbol of the kingdom or reign of God, the presence and activity of the sacred in the world. Its roots were in the imaginative vision and thought of the Hebrew prophetic book of Isaiah. The key impulses, energies, and dynamics in history and life are towards liberation or freedom, social justice, peace or well-being, joy in life, restoration and healing. These are the signs of the kingdom in the midst of life, the active, transformative God imagined in the symbols of spirit and light. The key sign of the kingdom among us is liberation, freedom, or salvation. An historian has said that if there's an acceptable bias in the writing and teaching of history, let it tilt towards liberation. Where peoples and communities and nature are liberated from the things that dehumanize, oppress, enslave, and destroy, the kingdom is among us, has drawn near, as Jesus said. For a very long time, the church thought it was the kingdom. But this kingdom of God, these impulses, energies, and dynamics of liberation, social justice, peace, joy, restoration, and healing were never confined to the church or Christianity. These impulses are not confined to religious communities. The kingdom impulses and energies are present in the world, among the world's religions and beyond them. The kingdom of God draws near, is present and experienced in the secular. Living and working in a very different context, Sri Lankan theologian D. Preman Niles was right to ask through his book title, "Is God Christian?" The answer, not just in the Eastern context, but also in the Western context, is no. God is God, spirit and light, in the world, in and beyond all religions. Niles pushes further and says, "Is there a Christian God?" Remains to challenge Christian piety. In the secular world, public theology will imagine its ultimate symbol, God, differently. The secular is the pluralist, democratic world of many religions and none. The levels of religious practice and belief have diminished radically in Europe in the 20th century. We have lived through a time in the West, including Ireland, of deconfessionalisation. There are attempts on the part of some church leaders, perhaps, and clergy, and some lay also to reconfessionalise. But that is not going to happen. A lot of traditional confessional theology has been abandoned by most Europeans and most Irish people. And yet, we now speak of a post-secular Europe. We have moved from religion to spirituality. And secular spirituality, or the spiritual in the secular, has at least three foci with which public theology can connect and collaborate. The foci are: one, the focus on the human. We share a humanity, and before we are anything else, Christian, Jew, Muslim, secular, humanist, atheist, Irish, British, male, female, gay, straight, transgender, rich, poor, black, white, coloured, or any other us-them dualism, we are human. We have a common humanity, and the values that make for flourishing are profoundly human values. The secular is about the democratization of common humanity and is centered on humane and the truly human values. The focus is profoundly spiritual, and public theology can connect and collaborate with its focus on the human. Two, there is the focus on nature and beauty. Secular spirituality has returned to the earth and its life forms with a deep appreciation for not only the beauty and complexity of nature, but also to find spiritual energy in art, poetry, and the rich, diverse beauty, the product of human nature, of nature and human creativity. The secular has a nature mysticism. Many of us watched the BBC television programme Blue Planet 2. The incomparable presenter David Attenborough, now in his 90s, has boundless energy and enthusiasm which is infectious. As far as I'm aware, Attenborough has no religious commitments, no belief in God. Repeatedly in the series, exploring life underwater, he expressed a profound sense of awe and wonder as he described life under the waves. His profound expressions of awe and wonder came across in tone of voice and in a beautiful, almost poetic use of language, and millions of us shared it. No mention at all of God or a creator, yet profoundly spiritual in a way that was rational, yet was much more than rational. There was emotion, imagination, and the mystical. Attenborough's deep sense of awe and wonder was also profoundly ethical because in the penultimate programme, he looked at the destructive effect of millions of tons of plastic which we humans dump in the oceans. Here was an ethic of care, of restoration, and the healing or mending of nature, eco-responsibility. The spirituality of awe and wonder and the nature mysticism is also profoundly ethical. Blue Planet 2 was invoked in the House of Commons when the government introduced its legislative programme to deal with our use and disposal of plastic. Public theology can connect and collaborate with the secular focus on nature and beauty. And third, the focus on ethics. The secular modes have made it clear that there is in Europe and the Western world a decline in institutional Christianity. This has also meant the decline in belief in theological doctrines of the religious institutions. Doctrinal concerns have been removed from the public space. This does not mean that Christian symbols of meaning have no power to evoke meaning and action in secular or post-secular Europe. But this calls for the reimagination of those religious symbols of meaning, and public theology recognizes this. Europe may no longer be a religious society, but it is an ethics society. The ethical concerns may well be unconsciously rooted in the Judeo-Christian tradition and also in the Islamic tradition. What we have now in Europe and Ireland is well on its way to this, is ethics, even Christian ethics, shorn of its doctrine. It has been said that we can be generous and caring without at the same time needing to sort out the details of the doctrine of the atonement. The secular society is not without ethics. Indeed, it has a strong focus on ethics without needing to bother with the doctrines of predestination, transubstantiation, theories of atonement, apostolic succession, or justification by faith and/or works. Public theology is about applied social ethics, and public theology can connect and collaborate with secular society's focus on ethics. We can connect and collaborate without mentioning God. But along the way, the secular may ask about the sacred and the sources of values and ethics, and public theology will then give a reason for the hope that lies within. One big question for discussion. Is God Christian? Is there a Christian God? How do we speak of God in a religiously plural and secular world?